Oh, hello, and welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you for joining us today. We have a very special guest, Desiree Goldey, and she is the Director of Marketing from ZRG Partners and the founder of Do Better Counseling, stationed in Texas. So I want to thank you, Desiree, for coming and meeting with us and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. This topic for me is not one I speak about all the time. So this is a great one for me. I do a lot of these, but this is one for me that really spoke to me, and I'm excited to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, then this is in honor of African American History Month, and we've been talking about racism and trauma. So we'd love to hear your experiences that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a very, I don't know if it's different than others, but my background is a little different. I um, grew up in a mainly white suburban neighborhood through my entire life. I was always the one and only in my class, or one of two in my class, and has my career and my trajectory through life has kind of been the same. Usually one of or two of in a room. And I think over time, that kind of mental challenge to be standing up for an entire race of people most of the time is exhausting. And it's a breakdown sometimes in mental health. And, I have a, I'm at the intersectionality of many things. So I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm also queer. So, and now I'm in my 50s. So, Lord help me, right? So, you show up a little differently over the years. And, I'm in that Gen X generation where times were still tough, right? There wasn't, and times are tough. Don't let me take anything away from any generation, but and times will continue to be tough as long as we live in the Americas. But, I think that my experience and trauma through my youth of being called names or microaggressions or, not being told I wasn't smart enough and, or, wasn't capable to do the things I know I'm capable of doing, that wears you down over time. And there have been moments in my life where the trauma of all of that, and people will disagree that it's trauma, but it definitely is trauma. The trauma of all of that starts to weigh on you, and there have been breakdowns in my career, in my life, that have resulted in many days of crying, because the weight of that can feel so overwhelming, right? And it's interesting because I even got it from my own race in some ways because I talk very proper, and when I was growing up, people of my own race would even make fun of me. So that kind of in between the middle of everything, it definitely builds a heavy weight. And I think most Black people, and especially Black women, carry this weight consistently. And it's a lead weight sitting on you all the time. And you have to shake that off every morning. And that weight feels sometimes just not worth it at some level. And so I'm glad to see a lot of Black women founders doing their own thing. I started my own thing. I do still work in corporate, but started my own thing. I'm so glad to see us pushing the narrative of that we can do this without you, and we can stand by ourselves, and that we don't need to sit in these rooms where we feel oppressed, and that we're willing to take on some self-care and not have us put ourselves last and our mental health last because it feels like a lot sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very interesting that you talk about the weight that you've had to endure because that's what every other person that we've had this discussion about. They talk about the weight that they have to carry starting very young.
Yeah.
Can you speak more about that?
Yeah. So I went to private. I went to, first of all, I started out going to Catholic schools, which is very interesting. And we don't need to get into religion. But I could read very young. And, I remember my mom telling me a story about how the nuns told me that there's no way I could read because there's just no way. And my mom had to fight with the nun to be like, yeah, she can read. It's amazing. A Black person can read. Like, it's almost comical, right? And then that kind of continued. I went to an all girls private school, and I was very fortunate to do that. But that came with its own struggles, right? Very privileged people who believe that their space should be their space, and that Black people shouldn't be kind of in it. And so they let one or two of us in. I feel like every once in a while, just to look like they were being progressive, but really weren't. And I had teachers who sat me in the back of the room. I had, you know, harder grading, I believe, on papers. I've had so much happen to me along that journey, and high school was rough. I'm going to tell you, high school was, it's a time you're determining who you're going to be and how you're going to shape the rest of your life. And to have that other piece to it, which most kids didn't have, and it felt like I was in a different universe. Like they weren't experiencing that. And it really, in high school, I really did struggle. I was, top of my class. I was valedictorian in my senior class, but you would never know the pain that was going on underneath that. My mom, thank God for her, kind of sheltered me through that, and got me to where I am, and got me to college, because I don't know I would have made it without her. Um, but it definitely is a different experience from, the other girls that were going to that school. And then I got to college, and same kind of thing. I went to a very white, predominantly white college. I went to Georgetown, and the biggest thing at Georgetown at the time was the basketball team. So they associated Black people with the basketball team, right? Well, yeah, of course, right? So you weren't there on merit. You were there because you got in because you were affirmative action, and all of those things, which wasn't true. I was top of my class. Like there was no reason. I had a very prominent school that everybody knew. So this became the kind of trajectory of my life, and realizing very early on, pre high school, that, and my parents used to instill this in me too, but you have to be better than everyone else all the time, is suffering. It's suffocating. It feels overwhelming. It feels like trauma. It feels like you're never going to live up and you're always going to disappoint. And as a young kid, that is, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, and we shouldn't have to put kids in that position, but we do. And we're probably going to have to for a long time. And, I'm not sure everybody lived the same truth, but I'm sure most of us did. I wish that we could get to a better place, but as you can see from the current political climate, we are reversing, the way we're going instead of moving forward. Sad to see.
Definitely. Yeah. Now there's been a lot of discussion about the whole having to do more and having to be more. And that must have been really, really difficult
Yeah,
for you as a child. And I remember reading, I recently read Between the World and Me,
yeah,
from Ta-Nehisi
yeah,
Coates, and
yeah.
he mentions that, and he mentions about how he would see white children. Like there was one instance when he was walking down the street with his son, and he said, my son I have to worry about, but their son commands the streets or the
Right.
sidewalk. And Did you feel that way, especially growing up in like in a predominantly white
Oh,
space?
absolutely. I mean, there's, I used to, it's something to feel unsafe as a child, even though your home is safe, right? So, like, there's this, you're on the streets and you're worrying about moving for a white person in the street or protecting yourself or looking out because the cops might think you did something. Or, I mean, it's just the constant thing of it goes round and round in your head consistently. You can't even worry about just living your life. Right. You can't just worry about being the best you want to be for yourself. So what ends up happening is you start, you know, caring less about what happens to you and more about how to succeed just in the general world, right? It's sad. So you start taking less care of yourself and your mental health. You're just pushing, 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 pushing. And then also trying to keep yourself safe at the same time. I mean, I don't have to tell you, I live in Texas, gun carrying Texas state. Now, I do live in Austin, which is beautiful and very much more progressive than the rest of the state. But we talk about it all the time, going to other portions of Texas, I would never go to, right? Still to this day, right? And that feeling that you are never safe is scary. It's really, really scary. And now what we've done is allow those who believe that way or may not have taken action for fear of reprisal. Now they feel emboldened to have that messaging or to attack someone in the street or anything. So, I have to be very careful about my spaces but that hasn't started now. That's been my whole life, right? That's been my whole existence about, we call it watching our sixes, right? I'm always looking around and making sure the people around me are okay with me as a person. And I shouldn't have to feel that way. I should be me in my space, in my skin, and just exist. But it's just not how it happens. And, I think about, you know, what would have been different sometimes if I grew up in a world that supported me. And, I can't imagine it. I can't even get to that place of understanding how my high school would have been different. My high school life would have been different, or how college would have been different, because it just so unimaginable for me to think of a world that would just accept me for who I am, and I move through it with safety, compassion, with people having empathy, with all of those things. It just doesn't seem like something that's real. It's an interesting thing and an interesting time, and my parents were doing the best they could as boomers. It's, they had struggled to get where they were and just wanted the best for their children and did everything to safeguard me against a life that was going to present me with consistent challenges. And so that do more philosophy comes from them, knowing that I needed to be the best all the time to be safe and succeed in life. But it also, that messaging from a parent drives this internal sense of disappointment all the time. And that is in itself just take that one piece alone. The fact that you could be disappointing someone every day is just, it's unfair, but it is how I grew up, right? If there was a B on a test, my father was not having it, right? Like, and so you studied harder and you didn't go out and you didn't watch TV and you didn't do all these things because you were told that B better become an A, right? Because that's what you needed in life. And it's just really tough. It's a really tough road to where I'm at now. And I think that I learned along the way that being myself was how I was going to end up succeeding in life, not the other way. And so, but it took me a long time to get there. Like I said, I turned 50 last year. It took me until my late 30s to determine that that's who I was going to be and how I was going to show up. And it took me a very long time. And I think it takes a lot of Black people a very long time to develop that sense that we're just not going to do it anymore. And sometimes some never get there. I had people push me, and good mentors and good people surrounded me enough for me to be able to achieve that space and achieve that moment. But I don't think everybody gets that. And so they struggle and would probably never reach their full potential, which is sad. And that's why I try to be a mentor for people and when I can, and help people when I can, because it is so important. And I also teach a lot of leadership now in my work about how to lead people who may be struggling with these things. Because when you go into these organizations, these people don't know how to lead people who are struggling with this kind of trauma and racial trauma every day. They think their experience is your experience, and it's just not how it is, right? And so it becomes it's it's a tragedy in itself, but I think we as Black people show up stronger and better for it in some degree, right?
Yes, yeah, I think so, definitely. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was, like you said, the mentality, and that you finally decided when you were in your 30s that, I'm going to be me, I'm going to show up. But, and sometimes I've noticed that some people, just like you say, never get there, and they're in that circle and they're struggling so much. And a
Yeah.
lot of it we don't see. But what can you say for our listeners that are
Yeah.
stuck there and unable to get out?
Yeah, I think what helped me, and I everybody's going to have their own kind of tactic, but I really believe in vision boards and journaling, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because I think if you set a goal and you can see that goal, you are more likely to figure out how to attain it. And so a vision board could be anything you want it to be, right? It could be all your dreams and hopes in the world. And you get to visually look at that board and say to yourself, what do I have to do to get there? And how do I be myself when I'm there? Right. And then if you match that with some journaling or some writing or even videoing yourself, I have a friend who video journals herself, right? And watches that stuff back. It depends how you are, right? A visual learner, a writer. I happen to write for a living. So, I write a lot. And so journaling for me kind of took me on that journey, right? I would write things I was feeling, understanding, really not understanding about myself, and then pinpointing where I felt this indecision or was questioning myself, and then worked on those specific things, right? I used to have a huge problem with, you know, voicing my opinion in a room because I always wanted to be a people pleaser, right? And so for me, I finally acknowledged that in a great journal writing that I always talk about. I finally called myself the people pop monster people eater, because I could, anything you said to me, I would say yes,
Mhm.
right? And that was such a fault of mine. And listen, it's great to want to please people in some degree, but at the expense of yourself, it doesn't work. And that took me time. It took me courses. I had to take a couple of courses. I had to read a couple books to finally figure out a path to get me out of that. Now I still say yes a lot, but I can say no and feel okay with saying no. And so some of those things is really about self awareness and self identification, about what you think is holding you back, because everybody's thing is going to be different. And it could be that you had a lot of trauma in your life, never mind being Black.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe you had some other thing happen to you that you need to work through. And I have a therapist. I believe in them. So if you don't, I completely understand. But there was trauma in my life I had to work through as well. So I think really investing in you, and not everybody else, right? Not the kids, not your husband or wife or partner or
Mhm.
whoever, not your boss, not your your employees, if you have them, really taking and setting time out to work on you is so important and can actually, and I'm going to tell you, in that moment in the 30s, when I finally identified who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up, it changed my life from a standpoint of everything, not just my career. I met my wife. We moved to Austin. I bought a house. I mean, it changed everything for me because I was more comfortable with who I was. I was able to show up in the rooms. I was able to have an authentic voice. I wasn't losing sleep over something I said all the time or trauma I felt I had from somebody else in a room. I was able to confront and stand up for what I believed in. Those make you feel fulfilled on a daily basis and allow you to move forward with other goals you have in your life. It's just I can't say that enough. Understanding who you are, what you need, and how you want to show up changes every piece and every aspect of your existence on this planet. And yeah, and if you can build a community around that, even better,
Yeah.
right? You can find those people that support you, want to hang on with you, want to be your ride or dies, want to really show up for you when the time is needed, when you are able to show up for others. That becomes the full Monty of how you really want to live your life. Because my community is small, right? Because I've really curated that community and taken a lot of negativity out of that community. And so it's been an interesting journey, Melody.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it sounds like it. And you bring up such good points. And talking about people pleasing, that's a
Yeah.
traumatic reflex. But, I think that our society has really made it even more so for a woman,
Yeah. Oh,
um,
absolutely.
that we have to be martyrs or something.
Mm.
And I don't know if you have children, but mothers have to be martyrs for
Yeah.
their children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so could you speak on to us on those things, how
Yeah.
it's not selfish and it's okay to be a woman and say no, and those
Yeah.
anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, this is conditioning, right? We've been conditioned by the society that we live in to think and react the way that we do, right? You're a woman. You must be a martyr for your children. You must give it all up for your kids. You must have kids. You must do all the things, right? You must participate in a way that makes you shrink yourself. That is conditioning that we've had over and over and over again. And I think, it's hard to combat that, especially if you grew up in a very traditional household, right? You were marked to do these specific things on a specific timeline, right? I think the best thing about the newer generations is they're saying no to that. They're saying, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to own a house. I don't want to have kids. I'm not going to stay at a company for 20 years just because you told me to, right? I think they're realizing that that doesn't bring fulfillment in a way that is showing up in the society right now. And women are a big push for that, right? We're seeing ads, women's sports. I mean, the time of the woman is now. And I think the you don't have to listen to society and your conditioning to feel fulfilled or successful. You have to define what that is for you, not what society tells you, not what you've been conditioned to understand you should look or feel like, right? I always talk about the fact that, my father was a big proponent of skinny women. Well, I am not a skinny, thin girl. I'm a big girl. And he drove it home consistently that weight was the issue. Well, as I got older, it really started to resonate with me that I can't be defined by a weight, right? But the conditioning from my father had taught me and I went on, and still to this day, are someone on the struggle. I've, over the years, I mean, I went through hard times of weight issues because of that conditioning from one man's voice telling me over and over, and society didn't help, but one man's voice telling me over and over that that's what good looked like, right? It couldn't look like a bigger girl. And so that condition shaped I mean, I can't tell you, it used to make me cry in fitting rooms, all the crazy things, because that's what I knew. But as soon as you're able to break that and say, I don't have to be that, I do not have to live up to that. As a woman, it can't make more difference in the any more difference in the world than that moment when you decide that conditioning isn't how you have to plan and live your life. And I love women's groups and I love women's energy, but women sometimes are also the hardest on other women, and you have been conditioned to compete against each other as well. Stop that conditioning right now. Like if you don't hear anything else from me, hear that. Stop being competitive against other women. I mean, look at reality TV, the housewives, all that run, all the things people want. That's pitting women against women all the time because that is how we've been conditioned to respond. If we could stop doing that and support other women, we would break some of that societal, stigmatism and stereotype and conditioning that people do. Our daughters would be thankful for it, and we would be more supportive as a community of women. And I that is that is one of my biggest arguments right now is women looking down on other women, especially on social media. It kills me. It's heartbreaking to watch.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And all that you're saying, that that can be tied into to any of the traumas that we're
Yeah.
talking about, and any of those things, the conditioning,
Absolutely.
and because we've all been made to think these terrible things about each other, and it's a way to control,
Oh, absolutely.
and I just wonder if we can ever stop that control.
I don't think so because here's the deal: the people in power of that, or like white cisgender men, right?
Mm,
Um, we can talk about that in any realm that you're talking about. You can talk about in politics. You can talk about it in you can talk about it in anything. That whoever's holding the power is going to take every chance they get to pull that power back in and not give it up. It's what's happening right now in our climate. It's what's happening by other women to other women, right? That controlling power for some is all they're living for, right? And so it takes a lot. I'm not saying it's not impossible to fight against the power, this powers that be, but it definitely is a fight because no matter what, whoever's in control is going to want to keep that control. And it's definitely a power move, right? All the time. Like if I'm talking negatively about another woman, that's because I'm either envious, jealous, or want to stop her from doing well. And if you start thinking about it like that, you're like, what am I doing?
yeah.
Right? Why am I doing that?
Mhm.
I do not understand why I'm jealous of this person. That's something I need to fix with me, not with them, right? And it becomes this constant cycle. When I see it in the social media presence, like something is wrong with you, not with that other person. You need to do some real internal self checking to see what's going on with you that you feel envious or jealous of that other person. And we see that even as in careers and organizations, right? When someone gets a promotion and you don't, right? It's that same dilemma. But the powers that be also kind of want you fighting. As long as you're fighting, they keep control. Stop the fighting, people.
That's right. That's right. And I think about it, even like I think that women don't li- don't always like it when other women succeed.
Yeah.
I feel like for some reason it's a knee jerk reaction when we see a woman succeeding. We're like, well, she's arrogant, or why is she acting that way? Do you feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. Again, conditioning, right? It's their immediate reaction to make something negative out of something that's positive, which is so unfortunate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Celebrate her, celebrate that she's doing good. And, we can talk about this too. Like, I'm tired of people using adjectives like she's too arrogant or too aggressive or too loud or too. Stop.
Yeah.
It just means women have a voice now,
Yeah.
right? And we're not shrinking in the corner
Yeah.
anymore. And so when I love for you to be loud and a little bit arrogant and a little bit show stoppy, because that's what we need more of, to show the powers that be that we're here and we're going to show up and we're going to fight against what's wrong and we're going to move forward and we're going to lead organizations. We're going to change the narrative that's been written out for us. That narrative was written by someone that is not me, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to live by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's so important. And if you look at people criticizing women and even other women criticizing women, it seems like it's different when it's a black woman. It gets really aggressive and really nasty.
yeah,
Like if I think about like celebrities and you
yeah,
think about like Simone Biles, Michelle Obama,
yeah,
Serena Williams, the attacks on them were very different than others.
yeah. Well, this goes back to the the theory that white women still want to hold on to the power that they have, which in the grand scheme of things is really still nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, but they're fighting to keep it.
Yeah.
They're gonna hold on strong. So, yeah, but that attack does come from primarily other women, and you see it horribly. I mean, horribly. And I think when you contribute to those conversations against Black women, when you are a participant in the negativity towards a Black woman, you only are proving the people that are in control and in power that they're right about us, that they're right to put you back in your seat, put you back in the kitchen, because you obviously can't handle what's out here in the real world because you immediately respond with negativity. It's a bad look. It's a really bad look. And I would hope that people would think about the choices they make on social media and speaking and talking in their communities about others, before they put pen to paper, because what you put on social media lives forever, right? Like, I don't care if you delete it, it lives somewhere. Someone will pull it up 20 years later. You are not doing yourself any favors. And also, I hope that you take a breath. I always tell people when I'm doing like leadership training, take a breath first before you react, because that 5 seconds you are thinking about what you're about to write or what you're about to post or what you're about to say can change your life forever, or affect the other person's life forever. So that one nasty comment on a LinkedIn post or that one nasty comment on an Instagram post can affect that person's mental health, can affect that person's trajectory. And you just don't know. And do you really want to be that person? Ask yourself, do you really want to be that person? And it's a hard thing. So yeah, it's tough stuff out there.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was talking to a coworker the other day, and they were talking about how she is extremely intelligent, and she said her entire life when she would be in different workplaces and workspaces, people would just look at her and automatically think that she was ignorant. And think that she was hired for the position she has because of DEI.
Yeah,
You
happens
know,
to me all the
never
time.
because of her never because of her merit or her
Yeah.
intelligence. Have you experienced that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm sure that even today, probably, 50% of the people that I work with think that I'm in the seat because of that. Right. Um, and I don't know that to be true. That's not a real data point, right? But I can imagine it's true. I can imagine that when I'm on LinkedIn and I show up and talk about very intelligent things, that people are immediate. There are some that are like, "What is she? She doesn't know what she's talking about just because I'm black." I'm sure that happens to me more times than it doesn't. And I don't set out to prove them wrong or right anymore. I know my worth. I used to set out to prove them wrong. Like, you know, I've been doing this forever. I don't really do that anymore. I've chosen, like I said, I've changed how I show up, and I change how I talk about myself and how I talk about others around me because, you know, I don't need to prove anything anymore at 50.
Yeah.
If I'm still proving something, we're in trouble. But no, I think that I would say, I'm sure most people think I'm a DEI hire, right? That I didn't get here on merit. Um, and that's sad. That's sad. And I hate the excuse that, you know, DEI in some way puts unqualified people in the seat. That's not what it means. I'm fine to not use the word whatever word you want to use or acronym you want to use. I just want you to get the work done. I want you to put the most qualified person in the seat, no matter what race or gender they're from or sexual orientation they're from. But that's not what happens in the real world, right? That is not what happens most of the time. Most of the time we're living with nepotism and bias and all of the other things that keep the people in control in control. And I like I said, I grew up, fighting that good fight all the time. So it's no different to me fighting it in career spaces. I just don't try to justify why I'm here anymore. Right. I stopped doing that a while ago. The proof is in my work and the people that I've built as clients, as friends, as colleagues, and community. I don't need to prove it to the masses anymore.
Yeah, and I can't imagine what that is like, having to prove things just because, like, for example, of your gender or the
Yeah.
color of your skin or, your sexual orientation. I can't imagine what that's like.
I can't either. I think about those that came before me
Mm,
and how hard my life. I can't even, Melody, I can't even imagine what that was like on a day to day basis. I can't. Um, and it makes me remember that, those that came before me, I owe them the 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 gift of me doing well, I guess. And so if for no other reason, the only times I think about doing well for somebody else is really for them, for the ancestors and the people and the women who came before me who paved this road so I can even do what I do,
yes. Mm,
right? Because that wasn't possible not that long ago. People forget. This is only 2025, people. This was going on in the 70s and 80s, okay?
yeah.
Like, and 90s still. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, we're not that far out of where women were not CEOs and were not running organizations and weren't doing these kind of things. And if people really knew their history and went back in their history uh, books, they would know that there have been Black millionaires way before, and there have been people who have succeeded on the path way before all of this happened. So I just, people don't know enough to make the claims sometimes they make.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Or they don't do their research
Right.
beforehand
Right.
and make
No, I
these
don't.
crazy statements.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Especially about DEI, right?
Yeah.
You don't even know
Yes.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if
Exactly.
you really understood what it meant,
Yeah.
you wouldn't even have made the comment. But the
Right.
fact that you make the comment makes me understand that you don't understand.
Yeah.
or that you didn't do your research, or you really are just listening to the media.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just wrote a post today about doom scrolling and listening to the media too much right now,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't think anybody's fair anymore. And I think if you get wrapped up in it, you tend to react to it without really digging into whether it's true or not, or what the true meaning is behind it. And one of the things I hate about social media is that people don't have to do as much reading and research and understanding of things, because they can just Google it, or they can just get a quick hit. And that first batch of information they get may be completely incorrect,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so I find it fascinating when people get on comments and social media or write these articles, and I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, what are you actually talking about? And I don't think they even know.
Yeah.
I
They're
just
just,
find it truly fascinating.
yeah. Yeah. It's like they're trying to look intelligent, but they're really not.
You're doing the opposite,
Yeah.
right? I don't know. I give people grace
Mhm.
for where they at in their experiences and their own trauma and their own life experience and their own journey, to a point, and to the point of just straight ignorance I can't tolerate. Because and as a Black woman, lived with him it my entire life and refuse to put up with it.
Yes. And I think that's the important thing when you can recognize things and decide, I'm not going to do that anymore, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that is a choice, right? And I want to reiterate that. I want to be very clear. That is a choice you need to make and say to yourself and stick to it. And that is not it. It sounds so easy. I'm going to stick up for myself. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do all these things. It sounds so simple, but it's not. It's actually really, really, really difficult. And it takes time and it takes purpose and intention to get to the finish line. And you have to make an emotion for yourself that that is the journey you're going to be on. And it's going to sometimes feel uncomfortable and feel like you're unrested and unsettled and maybe unfulfilled. But at the end of that journey, I promise you, it has bigger rewards than it has for the path that you had to get there. And, so I encourage your listeners to really maybe even set aside over a weekend and say, you know what, I'm just going to spend some time with myself while the kids are playing, whatever. Take an hour or two, just write down their goals, write down how they would like to show up, and just look at the list for a little bit and figure out what the next step is to getting me to my happy place, right? Getting
Yeah.
me to where I feel like my life is leading the way I want it to go, that it's not being subjected and um, influenced by the trauma I've suffered, that is not being, influenced by others around me about what they want from me. This is about me and me only, and then figure out what the journey is to get there. And I think they'll surprise themselves. I will tell you, I was super surprised by some of the things that I wrote down on this journey that I didn't identify were important to me, like being creative, right? Like I need to be creative in moments, so I do things now that inspire me to have that creativity piece. And I was fine. I'm a workaholic, so I thought I was fine just doing corporate work. But come to find out that is not really what I wanted for my life. So it's just always interesting to do these, like, and I do mine every kind of, I do check-ins with myself.
Mhm.
You know, and do them as much as possible to make sure I'm still sticking true to the journey and the path. So
Yeah, and all these things that you're talking about, they're so important. I know a lot of times people when we struggle, I feel like we look outward, you know, to the problem or outward to the solution, but we
right.
never look inside. of
Yeah, that's
ourselves.
great. That's a great point. That is so good. That is so true. We're like, what's going to fix this immediately for instant gratification, or who can fix it for me? Well, guess what? Most of the time, the answer is you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So take a little time with you and spend some time feeling out that. And if you still can't, if it's not you and you need other people, that's why that community comes in, right? But if you don't start with you and raise your own hand to yourself, I think you're working backwards, right? You're working from not a place where you truly get to your authentic self. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's well, this has been so fantastic, Desiree.
Thank you. This
And
was
I
great.
really, yeah, I really appreciate you coming and sharing with us because I'm sure all of the listeners have learned a great deal from you. And is there anything else that you feel like last minute you want to say?
No, I just hope that people, you know, do this self introspection. And then I encourage people to kind of shoot their shot, I always say. Go out there, shoot your shot, strive for the real things you want out of life. And maybe they don't meet everybody's expectations, but they'll definitely meet yours. And so that is what is important. And the journey can be tough, but I think it can be a beautiful journey.
It's true. Well, that is wonderful. And thank you for sharing with us. And if people want more of your content or the things you write, where can we find?
Yeah, so you can always get me if you're on LinkedIn. I'm Desiree Goldey on LinkedIn. If you're on Instagram, I'm at Recruiter Gold. On Blue Sky, I'm at Do Better People, and then you can always find me on my website too, which is dobetterconsulting.net. A lot of places to reach me.
Yes.
So if you need, I always accept connection requests right now. So please reach out. I'd love to chat.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so, so much. And anytime you're more than welcome to come back and
Oh.
share. We would love to have you.
I appreciate it, Melody. Thank you for having me.
All right. You have a wonderful day.
You
And
too.
everyone, just remember that you do not have to suffer alone.